morning. Good morning.
Like a nafsha should have been nafsha, but it doesn't mean that it would not be like an akam.
Of course. Nafsha Shimon Nafsha means that even when he's not here, he is.
Yeah.
So, all right. Does anyone remember who sponsored this? It was anonymous. For
You doing Yehoshua today?
Say it again? Yehoshua, Lag Baimer. All right. Okay. All right. So let's learn. So first of all, the breakfast this morning is the learning is dedicated, sponsored anonymously, Nishmas, Klonos Kalman Ben Chaim, or Chaim Ben Klonos Kalman. Okay. Shosh Aliyah. And with that, Shavuot Baruch and Hatzlacha should come to his mishpacha, the sponsor's mishpacha, the whole Kilo, all Klal Yisrael. Okay, so we're continuing on the Sefer Yehoshua. So everything's Bashkacha Prata. So it happens to be the sugi that we're up to in Sefer Yehoshua is it's related to the Daf Yomi. It's the sugis that Daf Yomi was recently doing, and it's also very Lag Baimer dik. So we'll learn Sefer Yehoshua, but we'll see it's also preparing for Lag Baimer. So the last thing we were up to in Sefer Yehoshua was the Maisa of the stones that the Jewish people, again, there were stones from the Yarden and so on that it says in Parshas Kisavai that Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael mitzvah, in the name of Hashem, that when you get to Eretz Yisrael, you go to a place of Har Grizim and Har Evel, those two mountaintops, and part of the avodah that you have to do over there is take 12 stones, right, and turn those stones into a mizbeach, and write the Sefer Torah in those stones. And so that's what we've been spending the past couple of weeks about, talking about those stones and the avodah of those 12 stones becoming a mizbeach, becoming a Sefer Torah, but then the next part is that the Rebbeinu Shalom, then Moshe Rabbeinu then gives over the message of what you're supposed to do with these mountains, on these mountaintops of Har Grizim and Har Evel. So it's a whole nice in Parshas Kisavai, and it actually happens in Sefer Yehoshua, where brachas and klos, blessings and curses are accepted on Har Grizim and Har Evel. To a certain, again, we're not going to speak about this week. Maybe next week we'll talk about exactly what's the halachic significance of this maimed of Har Grizim and Har Evel. But practically speaking, what happened was, and this is all based on Psukim and Parshas Kisavai, the Jewish people are divided in half. 6 tribes go to one mountain, go on top of one mountain, say Har Grizim, and 6 tribes go on to the other mountain, Har Evel. In between the two mountains, this is a Mishnah in Saita, the Mishnah, I think on the base or so, the Mishnah talks about this. So the Klal Yisrael are divided into 2, and then in between the mountains, on the ground, you have the Aron, right, with Kahanim and Leviim surrounding. and the Leviim, the Kahanim, on the ground, begin to call out 11 blessings, and corresponding to that 11 curses. Now what's interesting is that in Parshas Kisavai, what's spelled out are the 11 curses. It's not spelled out exactly what the 11 blessings are. But Chazal have this as a tradition, that each blessing has each curse has its corresponding blessing, which is basically it's reverse. So cursed is a person that has avodah zarah in his home. Blessed is a person that doesn't have avodah zarah in his home. So they parallel each other. And the curses, all of Klal Yisrael, whenever this was addressed to all of Klal Yisrael, that we're all accepting upon ourselves, but the curses were that the Leviim and so on would turn to Har Evel, and Har Grizim and so on for the blessings and the curses. So they returned to Har Grizim, they would say the curses, turn to Har Evel for the blessings, and this is how the Maimed took place. Again, we'll speak more about next week and coming weeks. What's the significance of this Maimed, the blessings, the curses, and so on. But for this week, as a hachana for Lag Baimer, so we'll speak about one particular aspect of that Maimed. And it's based on the first Marmakim that you have. This is a Rashi in Parshas Kisavai. So Rashi, it's interesting because Rashi, as we know, from his introduction to Chumash, he writes this, that he's focused on simply giving us what we need to know to understand Pshat. That's all he's focused on. He's not trying to give us any drushes and anything like that, just Pshuta Shel Mikra. That's what Rashi's focused on. But every once in a while, which itself needs an explanation, but every once in a while Rashi brings in Midrashim. Clearly those Midrashim are necessary to understand the Pshat. So in Parshas Kisavai, Rashi quotes the following Agadata, I guess you can call it. Re'isi b'yesayda shel Ramesha Darshan. This Ramesha Darshan He was not, one of the Gainim. So the Rashi sometimes quotes things that he saw from this Ramesha Darshan, different ways of explaining Chumash and Agadata and so on. So Rashi says, I saw from Moshe Darshan the following idea, that Yud Aleph Erurim, that if there were 11 curses, corresponding to that 11 blessings. So 11, okay. So why 11? So he says, Yud Aleph Erurim Yesh Kan, Kineged Yud Aleph Shvatim. So the 11 curses and corresponding blessings correspond to 11 out of the 12 Shvatim. This is one Shevet that's being left out, that the curses and blessings are not being openly communicated regarding that Shevet. In other words, what Rashi is quoting over here is that these are not just random curses or blessings that all of Klal Yisrael are accepting. Somehow, even though all of Klal Yisrael is accepting this, but each tribe in particular is related to one of those curses and one of those blessings. We'll see soon what that means. But that's 11 out of 12. What's the Shevet that was left out? Keneged Shimon lekasavar. Corresponding to the tribe of Shimon, there is no cursing that was mentioned. Why not? So said Ramesha Darshan, Rashi's quoting, because Moshe Rabbeinu knew that when he's going to pass away, he's going to give up brachas to Klal Yisrael, and he knew he wasn't going to give a bracha to Shevet Shimon. So since Kishaber Shar Shvatim, when he gives the brachas to the other Shvatim, so since Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm not going to give Shimon a bracha, so Lakach L'Retz L'Kalos, he didn't want to give him a curse either. So just Shimon is left out. So because he's not going to bless Shimon at the end, so he's not going to curse, he's not going to give a klala corresponding to Shevet Shimon right now either. That's Ramesha Darshan. Okay, so this is a Pella. So why did he want to bless Shimon? So for some reason in this Inyan, Shimon is being left out. So you have to understand what's the pnimis of this. Now we'll see, by the way, all at the very, very end. I just can't hold back. We'll see at the very, very end that Rav Tzadok HaKohen has a couple. He quotes this that Rishon Bar Yochai was from Shevet Shimon. So his name is Shimon. So anything we're going to learn about why is Shevet Shimon left out, not being cursed, not being blessed, it's going to be very relevant to understand Reb Shimon and to connect the Lag Baimer. But let's go a little bit more into this. Now, regarding this Indian of Shevet Shimon not being blessed, because that's where it comes from, right? Moshe is not planning, he's planning on not blessing Shimon. And because of that, he's not going to curse either. So, okay, so that's why if you go into Zaysa Bracha, Reuven is there, Yehuda, Levi, and so all the Shvatim, Shimon is not mentioned. So Rashi in Zaysa Bracha does say something though. Rashi, again, it's the Marmukah number 2, Rashi in Parshas Zaysa Bracha. So the blessing of Yehuda begins as follows: Shema Hashem Kol Yehuda. That Hashem heard the voice of Yehuda. Says Rashi, Kan Ramaz Bracha l'Shimon, Mitoich Berchaisav Shel Yehuda. So even though Shimon is not given a specific bracha on his own, but says Rashi, Yehuda's bracha begins with the word Shema. Shema Hashem Kol Yehuda. So this is a hint that even that Shimon also has brachas is just included and hidden and disguised within the brachas of Yehuda. And says Rashi, this is not only true for the brachas of Shimon by Yuzaysa bracha, v'av k'shecholku Eretz Yisrael. So too it is even in the portion of Eretz Yisrael when they divided it up. Natal Shimon mitoich gorola Yehuda. The way the map is, the Shevet Shimon's portion is really within Shevet Yehuda's portion. And so you have this Inyan of Shimon doesn't stick out on his own. Shimon is mysterious, Shimon is hidden. The brachas are not obvious. Certainly there's no curses that are obvious. His chilek in Eretz Yisrael is not obvious. But says Rashi, B'al it's contained within Shevet Yehuda. His Nachla, his portion of Eretz Yisrael is in Yehuda. His brachas are sort of contained within Yehuda. Okay. Now, so again, all this we have to understand. Why is Shimon so secretive? Right? Why is he excluded from these things? And the fact that whatever hint we do have to the brachas of Shimon and so on is within Yehuda is, I guess we can say, very ironic. Because when we think of Yehuda, what does Yehuda represent in terms of Klal Yisrael? They're the Malchus, right? They're the Malchus. Malchus comes from Yehuda. Of all the Shvatim that are the opposite of Malchus, it's Shevet Shimon. What do I mean? So take a look at Marmukah number 3. This is from Rav Tzadok in Takanas Hashavim, page 55. Unless you have to be a genius to even pick up on this. But it says Rav Tzadok, Lo himid Shevet Shimon melech v'lo shofet. He says if you go through Navi, in Shoftim, for example, or further, so we know the Malchus is by Yehuda. And there was a king from Shevet Binyamin, that Shaul Melech, and so on. If you go through the Shoftim, so before the kings, every once in a while there would be a shofet, a leader that would arise to take care of Klal Yisrael. Every single shevet had a shofet in the history of shoftim, except for Shevet Shimon. Shevet Shimon, there's no shofet from Shimon, there's no melech from Shimon. Shimon is a shevet that does not express leadership in that way. There's no shofet, there's no melech. That's where Tzadik points out in Takanas HaShalom. It's part of a longer Torah over there. It's a very ironic thing that of all the shvatim, the one shevet that does not express malchus is Shevet Shimon, and his brachas and his nachla is included in Shevet Yehuda, which is all about malchus. That's a very funny thing. Say it again. Of course, but it's going to take time to get there. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's go back. This inyan that Rashi quoted from Ramesha Darshan, that the 11 curses correspond to the 11 shvatim, right? And that's why Shimon is left out. So, like, what does that mean? It means, all of Klal Yisrael accepted these curses and blessings. So, what exactly does this mean? So, we're going to learn some Tzaddik today. Okay, so it says Tzaddik like this, and this is in Tzikas Tzaddik, Piece Mem Tes. Again, he's not talking about this particular sugya, but it's a way to enter. It says Tzaddik like this: Kol echad yeda. Everyone should know. He's talking about the individual, but it's true for Shvatim as well. Kol echad yeda. Everyone should know. Whatever area a person has a struggle that struggles with the most in terms of the Yetzer Hara, whatever area of life the Yetzer Hara is the strongest in that person, you should know who klimuchan la'isen dvar b'yaiser. You should know that area davka, you're prepared and capable of becoming unbelievably great in that inyan. Liyas nekiyim v'zakim, that's like for that area of life to be pure and holy by you. So that's the area that the Yetzer Hara is targeting, because that's your inyan. And that's the inyan that you're predisposed and predestined to be great in. Therefore, areas that there's a lot of, that a person unfortunately fell into a lot of averos in that particular area, Yeda, you should know, that you are predestined, and that's a simon, it's an indicator, that area specifically you're custom made, the Baisadavar Naki Bar Lev, to be pure and holy in that inyan. And so through tshuva and so on, that's the area that eventually you will excel in. Therefore, because of this, says the Medrash in Vayikra, the Medrash says that any body part that a person did an avera with, yasa mitzvah, that's the limb that you should dafka do mitzvahs with. The ein zarak tikun laver kademis mida keneged mida. Says Tzaddik, it's not the pshat only that it's a tikun, like that limb is damaged, so you have to fix that limb. So you do mitzvahs with that limb. It's not just a fixing of the limb. Avlutika nafshe b'frat. The fact that a person made naver in that limb, that's an indicator that that's your inyan, that's your limb. So of course you have to do mitzvahs with that limb. That's just an indicator of that. So you have to fix the mistake, but it's also a simon of that person's potential greatness. Based on this, as we're going to see in a moment, these 11 curses that correspond to the 11 shvatim, it's not a random thing. Each one of those curses correspond and is an expression of the particular weakness of each one of those tribes. But as we saw from our tzaddik, once you could identify the weakness, then now you know what the strength is, which is just the opposite of that weakness. So 11 out of the 12, we have an identification of their weakness and memelo, their strength, their curse and their blessing. But again, as I said, we're not, again, so it would be an avodah, we could go through each one of the shvatim to figure that out. But right now, again, the avodah with Shevet Shimon, their curse is not identified. So what do we do with that? So Marmaka number 5. So in Takanas HaShavim, page 51. So our tzaddik says like this. Now he's talking about this inyan of Shevet Shimon's curse not being mentioned. But again, it's based on what we just saw from Tzikas Tzaddik, that these curses are identifying the weakness and memelo, the strength of each Shevet. The whole Shevet, he says, Yesh le chisar miyuchad. Every Shevet has its deficiency, has its weakness. It has its weakness. Dal zen nemar yud al varurim. And that's where these 11 curses are coming from. They're identifying the weakness of each Shevet. But again, you have the weakness, now you know what the strength is. Neged yud al shvatim, based on the 11 shvatim. Vishamati, and says for tzaddik, and I heard this, and whenever he says I heard, it means from the Ishbitzer, I heard, to neged hachasroinis shebesharish kol Shevet, that these 11 curses correspond to the inherent weakness and the the strength of each Shevet. The neged Shimon lekasav chasar, but again, Shimon, the curse is not recorded. Again, as we saw from Rashi, because Moshe wasn't going to bless Shimon, and so Mele is not going to curse Shimon. Now we have a little bit a better identification or at least a clarification of what that means. It means that the inherent strength of Shevet Shimon is not something that can be written. It's not something that can be written. And because it's not something that can be written, their chesaron is also something that can't be written. So what does that mean? The Nir Mizah, it says the fact that the brachas of Shimon and Memel, the curses of Shimon, cannot be written, it means like this. It means the greatness of Shevet Shimon cannot be recorded in word. It cannot be put into words. And Memel, the chesaron of Shimon, also cannot be put into words. The Yefshua Kaisai. Why? So it says Ritzadik, because here, this is the chesaron of Shevet Shimon. Ki be'emes chesaron kezeh hanimsa b'maisa shitim, yefshua kol laham in shiva zer Yaakov. What's the chesaron of Shevet Shimon that Moshe Rabbeinu does not want to put in writing? The chesaron of Shevet Shimon is the maisa that happened in Shittim. Shittim is right before Klal Yisrael, right after Bilam, the maisa of Bilam. Bilam curses, he tries to curse, he ends up blessing, and so on. And so all of a sudden, Klal Yisrael have this taiva, and then they start intermarrying with the women of Midian, right, the women of Moav, and so on. Ad Kedei Kach, that the Nasi of the tribe of Shimon, Zimri ben Solu, has a relationship with Kozbi Bas Tzur, a princess of Midian, Barabim in front of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Sanhedrin and so on, until Pinchas comes and kills Kozbi and Zimri, and there's a Magefa, 24,000 people are killed, and that's where and Pinchas kills Kozbi and Zimri. The Magefa ends. That's the mice at the end of Parshas Balak, and it begins into Parshas Pinchas. Says Ritzadik, that's the chesaron of Shevet Shimon. The chesaron of Shevet Shimon is intermarriage, of mixing between the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world, having that dveikus with the goyim, such a thing. That's the chesaron of Shevet Shimon. It says like this: Ki be'emes chesaron kizeh, such a chesaron, hanims of ma'aseh Shittim, which expresses itself in that story of Shittim. Yefshah kol laham in shiva b'zer Yaakov. It's impossible to understand and to believe that's possible by the Jewish people. This is why it can't be written, because you can't believe it. You just can't believe it. So once it's written down, it's like, okay, it is. It's impossible. Why? Ki avodah zarah, he says like this. So what we think of like the worst things in the avodah zarah, right? So it says like avodah zarah, you could believe that a yid can fall into avodah zarah. Why? Because it's not a real connection. It's not a real bond between the Jew and the idolatry. Rak if dimyan, it's just this guy's imagination. Shemedama zel elohos. He has an imagination. He's making a mistake in his mind that this is a god. But what is the truth? It's a stone, it's a rock, it's a tree, it's b'chal dimyan. So nothing objectively, there was no objective connection between this guy and avodah zarah. It's in his own head. Okay, so it's a dimyan, so the whole thing, so it's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you understand, it's not something that, it's not real. It's not real. But if a Jew, God forbid, lives with a non-Jew, and they become one flesh, and they're able to produce a child that has this guy's blonde hair and her disposition. This baby is a unification of both parents, right? Every kid is the pasuk says right by he should connect to his wife. He should become one flesh through the child.
Why is this different than any Gilui rights?
So we'll see. So in the Gilui rights, it's such a thing. You can have Yidden connecting to each other, but by a Yid and a Goy, that we understand that they're mamish different species, and such a thing to have a connection between the two of them, that's a pella. So he says like this: such a thing of having a yichud with a non-Jew and even being able to produce a child, that's an objective yichud. That's a real connection. That's not something you can just say, okay, it's an imagine. That's something just there's a baby that's produced that's running around. I mean there's a connection there. The Yisrael hadveikim elokim chayim, and the Klal Yisrael that are truly davik to their Rebbeinu Shalom, eich ev shali davik shekeneged zeh. How can they become unified with a force that's the opposite of elokim chayim, a bas el necher? And so this is a chesaron that it's impossible to truly comprehend how such a thing is possible. V'haksav, so Mela, to write down in Chumash such a chesaron and to say a 12th curse, cursed is someone who lives with a non-Jew. So he says writing that b'ksav hudav hagoy l'kol, that would be telling the world that taka, there's such a chesaron, such a thing is possible, and it is what it is. It's written down, it's black and white. So he says, "V'shiyah chesaron kafi hanigla ha'maisa," and to say that this is a chesaron, that this is a problem that is exactly what it seems, what it looks like on the outside. Hudavar sheyesh, it's impossible. Such a thing is impossible. So it must be that whenever an experience like that happens, you can't just define it based on the externalities of what would be, how you would describe it in writing. There's got to be something deeper to what's going on. So what's Ritzadik telling us? There's a lot going on. We'll see what we can do. But the inherent chesaron that theoretically would be by Shimon is what? Is this inyan of dvekus with Bas al Necher, with the non-Jewish world, which l'cha'ira is a siman and an indicator that chas v'shalom, that yid is completely not dovek in Elokim Chaim. Because if a yid is dovek in Elokim Chaim, then it's bin b'shein amina. It's a bunch of different species. The fact that there's such a thing that a dvekus can happen between a yid and this non-Jew, indicating that it's bin b'minai, it means that the yid is betzim not dovek to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the chesaron of Shevet Shimon. That's the chesaron of Shevet Shimon. And he says like this, and this idea of Shevet Shimon embodying such a level of, again, and says Tzaddik, such a thing is impossible. Such a thing is impossible. So you can't write it down. It can't be written. So it can't be codified and solidified in writing that such a thing is possible. It happened. The kid's running around, Okay. There's something going on. There's something Lamar's ayin, something that your eyes and biology and like DNA and it's all there. There's something else going on. It's more mysterious than that. There's something going on. And says Ritzadik, this inyan of Shevet Shimon representing a situation where the truth is so concealed, ad kedei kach, that you can't even describe what you're seeing because the truth is so concealed. This inyan is connected to Shevet Shimon. He says like this: Ki shayrish koyach kedusha Shevet Shimon, because the root of the kedusha of Shevet Shimon is nelam ha'oid ba'ilamaza, is extremely hidden in this world, extremely hidden. Ki hu shayrish alma deskasi hanel. He says this amazing thing. You guys know this already. I've mentioned this many times, that between Rachel and Leah, so Rachel always means revealed kedusha, right? Alma desgalia, the revealed world, revealed kedusha, and Leah always means Alma deskasya, hidden world, the hidden kedusha. Now, Sefer something like this. It means Leah is always going to be hidden, b'chlal. But Sefer something like this. Leah had 6 sons and 1 daughter, Dinah. That corresponds to the 7 midas from Chesed through Malchus, which means that Reuven is going to be Chesed and Shimon is going to be Gevura. Gevura always means restraint, something that's hidden, keeping something in. That's what Gevura means. So all of Leah b'chlal is hidden, and the Gevura of Leah means hidden sheba hidden. What shevet is Gevura of Leah? That's Shimon. So the whole inyan of Shimon is Helam sheba Helam, concealment within concealment. That the real truth is so hidden, not just that you don't see it, but it's a disguise of the opposite of the truth. So in other words, what Rav Tzaddik is telling us is as follows: that the pnimius of Shevet Shimon is what? Is absolute yichud with Bari Olam, absolute oneness and absolute integration and dvekus with Elokim Chaim. But because that inyan of dvekus by Shimon is so deep and so profound, again, whatever deficiency you find, that's an indicator of that shevet, to that person's potential greatness. If the chesaron of Shevet Shimon is such a profound chesaron of the opposite of dvekus with Hashem, ad kedei kach, that it's even possible that your eyes tell you that there was such a lack of dvekus between this Jew and his Creator that he's able to become dovik to another species. That he's b'chlal different. He's no longer a Yiddish species. He's now like a guy. Chas v'shalom means the chesaron of Shevet Shimon is what? A lack of yichud with Bari Olam, to the point of where there's kiviyachol a yichud with other things. So it means the blessing of Shevet Shimon is what? Is such a profound yichud with Bari Olam that also can't be described in himself. I mean, so in other words, so what's the inyan of Shevet Shimon? The inyan of Shevet Shimon is yichud kutshabricha shchente, a yichud between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Knesset Yisrael, but not stam a yichud that any other shevet can identify with. The yichud of Shevet Shimon is such a deep hiskashus with Bari Olam that the blessing can't be described, And Mamela, whenever you're dealing with the curse, which is always the opposite of the blessing, the curse of Shevet Shimon, the Chasarn of Shevet Shimon, is such a breakdown between the Yichud of Hashem and the Jewish people that even that you can't even describe either. So the Inyan of Shevet Shimon is Yichud, but not just a Yichud in the deepest of senses. That's the blessing of Shevet Shimon, and Mamela, that's the curse of Shevet Shimon, a reality that seems to be the exact opposite of that Yichud.
Only Shevet Shimons were
Maisa Shitim. The roiv of Maisa Shitim was Shevet Shimon, and Befrat the Nasi of Shevet Shimon. Not Befrat the Nasi. So this is what we're going to find is that now we have to identify for ourselves listen, every single Shevet and every single Yid is Moshe Rabbeinu said, Atem Tzveikim Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kol Chamayim. The essence of the Yid is be Davik to Hashem. But what we're seeing from Tzaddik over here is that there's really two madregas of that connection with the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's the average connection of Ruvain, Levi, Yehuda, V'chulu, which is beautiful and it's gavaldik, but that's not the deepest, most intense yichud. The deepest, most intense oneness is Dafka by Shevet Shimon, and that's why the curse of Shevet Shimon, which is the opposite of the greatness of Shevet Shimon, is such a breakdown of that yichud, ad kedei kach, that a Yid and a Goy are becoming one. So we have to identify for ourselves what does it mean a yichud between a Jew and Hashem as far as other Shvatim are concerned, and what's the more intense yichud by Shevet Shimon.
It's funny, without Shimon, it's Yud Aleph is like an inauspicious number.
Yeah. That's Yud Aleph, Ketyrus and so on, yeah. Okay, so then that'll be more next week. We'll talk about that. Why B'chlal? Because it's Yud Aleph. When you take Shimon out, it's 11 out of 12. Okay, so let's identify this. Huh? Yeah. Well, it's also brachas. It's ironic that the pasuk only talks about the klaus. We have to figure out the brachas. Again, we'll speak about that more next week. But in terms of this nakuda,
why are they included on the mountain? They should be excluded.
No, because they're a part of. That's the point. The brachas and the klaus of Shevet Shimon are not able to be written b'ksav, but they exist. They're there. The truth there is the brachas of Shimon, and as Rashi said, they're included in Shevet Yehuda. We'll have to work this through, step by step. So first of all, what is the average? I would say average, non-Shevet Shimon dika yichud between a Jew and the Rebbeinu Shalom. So that's a beautiful thing. It means there's a God, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is your creator, and he's the Bayrei, and he takes care of you, watches you, and there's you're a Yid, and you're Davik to Hashem. You think about each other, right? You do mitzvahs. You're constantly serving the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom is taking care of you. It's a beautiful relationship, a beautiful bond between two entities, between two beings. The Rebbeinu Shalom and Knesset Yisrael. Hashem Yichud Kushabrichu Shchinte is Gevaldik. But Kadam Shevet Shimon, and Shevet Shimon is Magala, a much deeper level of oneness. And in the Kabbalah Sfarm, the language that we can use to describe this higher level of Yichud that's revealed through Shevet Shimon is what's called a Yichud Minei Ubei. A yichud from within itself. A yichud from within itself. In other words, the usual level of yichud when we think about connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's the Rebbeinu Shalom is there, I am here, and we face each other, face to face. We connect to each other. I daven to Hashem, I call to Hashem, Hashem watches it. Let's go on. Shevet Shimon says, but the thing is, but what happens when a Jew, God forbid, from that perspective, that context, what happens if a Jew turns away from Hashem? Or what happens if Hashem turns away from the Jew? Then you're left by yourself. So you don't want that. You want to be connected to Hashem. So you want to remain face to face, which are conditions. You have to have mitzvahs. It has to be the right opportunity, the right time. There's such a thing as a yichud of one face to face between you and God. But if you turn away, then there is no yichud. Come Shevet Shimon, and Shevet Shimon reveals that even when you turn away, and you turn away from Hashem, and all you do is face yourself and your mamash alone, guess what you find when you turn into yourself? You also find God. That's called a yichud minei ubei, a oneness, a unity between you and God from within yourself. Minei ubei. That there's no two different beings bonding with each other. Wherever you, even in a situation of loneliness and isolation, within yourself is also elokus. And the yichud between the Jew and God is not something that has to be found outside of the self. The Rebbeinu Shalom that you're turning to is you from within you. Now let's see how this expresses itself. Dafku Shevet Shimon. So take a look at Maramaka number 6. This is also from Takanas Hashavim, page 51. Ratzadik makes an observation. It's related a little bit to what I spoke about. That was the last week with the Kamarna, the yard site by the Kamarna. So it's for those that heard it or understood what I was talking about. So it'll resonate a little bit more, I think. Ratzadik says like this: let's say the first two sons of Leah, Reuven and Shimon. So Hashem, why they named that? So it says in Pasuk, Leah names her son Reuven, Ki ra Hashem es ani, because Hashem saw my pain and my affliction, my poverty. Hashem saw the tzaras that I was going through, and Hashem gave me a son. That's Reuven. And then it comes the second son, Shimon. Why is it called Shimon? Ki shama Hashem ki snu anochi. Hashem heard that I was hated, and Hashem gave me a son. So Reuven means seeing, and Shimon means hearing. Hashem saw Leah's pain, her poverty, her impoverishedness, and Hashem heard that she was saying that she's hated. So what's the difference? He says like this. Ratzadik makes a brilliant observation. I'll tell you outside. When it comes to seeing, vision is something that is mitzad, the looker, the one that's seeing. In other words, there's an objective thing on the table. There's a paper on the beam. And so I am looking at the paper. The reality is an objective truth, it's an objective zach, and it's coming from my perspective, from the perspective of the seer. What's amazing is when it comes to hearing, it's not like that. Hearing, there is no objective thing that I am looking at that we could all sort of like agree upon. Hearing means that I'm listening to what you're saying, and what I hear is completely dependent on you. Like if you want to lie to me, then I hear the lie. Hearing is a way that I hear your perspective. Not that I see my perspective, I hear your perspective. So what's the difference between the Rabbanah Shalom seeing something and the Rabbanah Shalom hearing something? Here's the amazing thing. The Rabbanah Shalom seeing, that's understandable. The Rabbanah Shalom is truth. The Rabbanah Shalom is, like the Rambam says in the beginning of Mishnah Torah, Matzoi, he is reality. He is the reality. So what he sees, it means that's truth, that's reality. But the concept of Hashem hearing is an unbelievable thing. Hearing means that there's me. And I have my perspective. I have my reality too. And my reality, maybe my reality is crazy. Maybe it's a ridiculousness. It's a mishagas in my head. But to me, it's real. To me, it's the truth. God hears that. God hears that. In other words, because you would think like this. Mela, if I'm saying words that are true, so the Rabbanah Shalom can hear that. I understand, because if it's true, then the Rabbanah Shalom is like, it exists by his perspective too. But what if I'm saying something which is absolutely false? Does God hear that? Leah said something which is absolutely false. Kisham Hashem kisnu anochi. Let's understand. If she thinks that Yaakov Avinu hates her, who's Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov Avinu is Sadik Yisod Olam. Yaakov Avinu is the Merkava for Elikos. Yaakov Avinu is the Rabbanah Shalom in the world, Kiviyachol. If she's thinking that Yaakov hates her, what does it mean if Yaakov hates her? It means the Rabbanah Shalom hates her. Is that true? Of course it's not true. But that's how she felt. Kishama Hashem kisnu anochi, and Hashem heard that. How could it be such a thing that that thought, those words of Leah Imenu could enter by the Kisei HaKavod? Rabbanah Shalom is truth. Emes v'chesamei emes. How could Sheker get to that place? If it's a truth, then the Rabbanah Shalom can see it. But how could the Rabbanah Shalom perceive a falsehood? The answer is, but for Leah, that was the truth. Yeah, but it's not the truth from the Rabbanah Shalom. How could Leah have expressed something which to her is true, but it's not objectively true? The answer is because deep down inside of Leah is also, of course, there's also the Rabbanah Shalom. And the fact that anything that Leah is feeling and saying and sensing, even if it's not maybe a truth based on vision, but if it's something that she's feeling, then of course that's true. Because Shevet Shimon is a revelation that the Rabbanah Shalom is Minei Ubei. It's within the Yid himself. And even within all your narishkeit and shtusim and avom and demyonis and fantasies and illusions and shkarim, the Rabbanah Shalom is also there. There's no separate entity called God that you have to face and turn to. And when you turn to Him, there's His perspective and there's your perspective. And if what you're presenting is a shtos, the Rabbanah Shalom doesn't hear it because He is truth. The Rabbanah Shalom is Minei Ubei. It's within you. You have a chelik l'kami malmish, that is the source of dvekus from within yourself, which means that all the inyanim that are coming out of you have a place. They have a place. This is what I was speaking about by the Kamarna, by the yard side over there. I was talking about this inyan by the Kamarna of there being a level of amuna, which means absolute truth, atzilistic, and then an inyan of shvichas alev, of pouring your heart out with all your personal requests, which assumes that there are chesronis in your life and there are things that need to be fixed. And the answer is how they're both true. The answer is Shevet Shimon. Shevet Shimon means that there's an objective truth of the Rabbanu Shalom, but your reality, as far as your feeling and your inyanim, is also true. The Rabbanu Shalom is, and why is that? Because you have a chelik al-kamim al-mamish. God is big enough to be in two places at once. God is out there by the Kisei Kavod, and He's also deeply within you as well. And so whenever you turn away from the Rabbanu Shalom, you're not turning away, you're turning within yourself, and guess what you find inside? Like David Melch says in Tehillim, Im esek shamayim, if I go to heavens, shamata, I find you. Im eretz sha'ol, and I go to the depths of hell, which is within the self, turning away from God, hineka, behold, you're there too. That's the secret of Shevet Shimon, that's the secret of hearing. Ki shama Hashem smunach, that even words that are not true, but they were words that were said by Leah from her kishkas, the Rabban Shalom heard that. How did he hear that? How do false words make it to the Kisei HaKavod? The answer is false words can't go to Emesek Shemaim. They can't go to Shemaim. False words stay in Sha'ol. They stay in the depths of the person. But Hineka. But that's what the Rabban Shalom is too. And the Rabban Shalom's truth is able to encompass both perspectives of what I was speaking about, Shabbos Afternoon, Atzilus, and also the perspective of Biyah. They're all true. This is the secret of Shevet Shimon. This is a yichud that cannot be described. You can't describe this because it doesn't fit with the usual way of thinking about a yichud. A yichud means two entities that come together, which is dependent on environments and healthy and situations, face to face, back to back. Not always. B'ksav, you can't describe such a yichud. And memelo, you can't describe in writing the opposite of that yichud, because the opposite of that yichud is what is a Jew turning away from their Rebbeinu Shalom and deeply connecting to a non-Jew. That's also it's an impossibility. Because the yichud between Kuchabrichu Shchinte, between Hashem and the Jewish people, is so deep that it's minei obey. So such a thing is impossible. You can't. Again, if it's a bond between the Rabbanu Shalom and Hashem, there's such a thing as you get there's a gerushin. There's such a thing as a get, but you can't have a get if it's minei obey. It's interesting. It's brought down. There's such a minig not to give gid in the month of Iyar. Such a thing. Not to give the month of Iyar. One of the reasons for that is halacha, because there's a question how to spell Iyar. 2 yuds, 1 yud. Hashgacha report, there's no gid in the month of Iyar. See, Lag Baimer is the Chai Iyar. Lag Baimer is the lifeblood of the Iyar itself. No gid in the month of Iyar. So the whole inyan of Gerushin is a separation between two entities that until now have a dvekus. Two entities have a dvekus, that dvekus can be broken. But the whole inyan of Lag Baimer of Shimon is what? Is that there's a yichud minei obey. It's an impossibility to go away. There's no such thing as gid. That's the idea. Let's see how Ritzik puts it inside. And we'll take it from there. Marmuk number 6. Ubishmiya. When it comes to hearing, Yuchol Adam Wadas Matmanaisav Usasarav Shal Chaveroi. When it comes to hearing, a person is able to know the secrets of your friend. In other words, but not objective secrets, from your friend's heart. Mashabali by Nelam Vitamir, what's contained in a hidden place in your friend's heart. Sheyishmalai B'diburai. I could pick up on, I could learn from his words. But vision or other senses cannot pick up on that how that person sees things. If I look at things, it's how I see things. If I feel things, it's how the thing objectively feels. I can't put myself in your head through vision. I can only put myself in your head through hearing. That's the only way to do it. Vision and so on picks up things that are obvious on the outside, but I can't experience life from your vantage point unless it's with hearing. And the birth of Shimon came by Leah realizing that Hashem hears her thoughts that she was saying to herself that she's hated. Even in heaven, there's such a thing as hearing. After Hashem, you're leiv, even though we have this idea that Hashem sees the heart, and Hashem sees that which is hidden. When there's such a thing as described in Shemaim as Hashem seeing nistaris and Hashem seeing that which is hidden, those are hidden things that are just objectively they're objectively true. They're just hidden from anyone else. But then there are things that are hidden. They're not just like covered over, behind closed doors. They're your perspective. They're things that are only from you. That's something that vision cannot pick up on. Hearing picks up on that. Seeing is something that's it's a observation of reality based on the eyes of the seer. But davar nira. Vashmiya hu rak ma she'olam mashmiya lo. But hearing is I learn what I'm being told by you. V'hamashmiya mashmiya kfi tfisas v'asagase. And the speaker says his perspective, and I listen to that, and I absorb his perspective.
People here are subject to their interpretation of what they listen to.
But the Rebbeinu Shalom, when he hears something, it's at well, that's only because of our chesroinus. But a person's supposed to hear. Hearing it by fundamentally is being open and hearing exactly what's being said. Yeah, if a person's not really hearing properly, they're putting their own perspective on it too. That's because that's a chesron in their hearing. But if a person's hearing properly, it means that you're picking up on everything. Valkim beru'iyah namar. So this amazing thing. So it says something like this. This is a whole arichas. I don't have time to go into this, but it says when it comes to Ruvain is named Kira Hashem ha'ani. Hashem saw my impoverishedness. That could be an abstract truth. That can be an objective truth. That Leah needs help. That could be a reality. That's fine. The Rebbeinu Shalom can see that. That's an objective truth. And more than that, the Rebbeinu has an arichas. He go on to talk about this. How that is a point of beauty by Klal Yisrael, that we could acknowledge that we're poor, we're impoverished, we need Hashem's help. That's gewaldic. But you're never going to find this description that Hashem saw my hatedness, the fact that I was hated. Because that's not true as far as a Riyah. The Rebbeinu Shalom seeing things, it means his perspective. Of course you're not hated. Of course you're not hated. Hashem can see your impoverishedness, He can see your deficiencies, He can see your chesroiness, but to see that you're hated? Being hated is only your perspective, not God's perspective. That's why Reuven does not have that description of Hashem saw the fact that I was hated. But comes Shevet Shimon, and Shimon comes and says, Hashem heard that I was hated. That's the chiddush of Shevet Shimon, that there's a yichud minei ubei. Now our tzaddik over there in Takanas Shavim pulls it back to the very, very root. Let's go. This is an amazing thing. In classic Rav Tzaddik, you want to identify something, go to its shirish and chumash, the first place it's mentioned. What's the first place in all Tanakh the idea of hearing is mentioned? So the first pasuk that hearing is mentioned is in the Ma'aseh after the Chait of Adam and Chava. And it says that the Kol Hashem was going through the Gan Eden, and Adam and Chava heard the voice of Hashem and started running away to hide. And then Hashem says, like, why are you hiding? So Adam says, I heard your voice, and I got nervous, and I went to go hide. I got embarrassed, and I was running to hide. And Hashem says, who told you you should be embarrassed? You're naked. Who told you that you're naked? So I'm in an 8, to eat from the tree of knowledge. You listen to the voice of your wife. That's the context where Shmiya is first mentioned in Chumash. In Ma'aseh Bereishis, it's all about seeing, right? Hashem saw and it was good. Saw. It's all Riyah. The Chiddush of Shmiya comes as a result of the Chait, when Adam and Chava hear the voice of Hashem and they run away in embarrassment. Listen to this. He says like this: Shmiya Nitzka Rishayna B'Torah Ba'Adam. The first time Shmiya is mentioned is by Adam Rishon. V'yishmu es kol Hashem Elokim es halach bagan. That they hear the voice of Hashem going in the Gan Eden and they run away. V'sharish hatshuva b'mikra zeh. Says Tzaddik, this is also the pasuk that's the very root of tshuva. The very root of tshuva. The Shmiyas kol Hashem v'yischavu, because what happened? They hear the voice of Hashem and they're embarrassed and they run away. Busha, that sense of embarrassment, that's tshuva. She'ikra tshuva. The main thing of tshuva is habusha me'achet, is to be embarrassed of the sin. Chazal say ha'over aver u'mizbayish ba. Person does an aver and they're embarrassed. Meichlin, that's mechil, that's tshuva. So here's the irony of all ironies. What does tshuva mean? Tshuva means to return to Hashem. And what was the root of tshuva? Them being so embarrassed, which is tshuva, and they're running away from Hashem's voice. Because that's the secret of sound. The secret of sound is when you turn away from God and you run the other way, where are you running to? Also to God. That's the chiddush of Shmiya. That's the chiddush of Shimon. That in their busha, that they turn from Hashem and they're running away from that sound, who are they running to in their busha? They're running to Hashem. So tshuva means to return to Hashem, and the direction they were running is the opposite of the Rabbanu Shloim. But guess what? There is no other direction. You're going within yourself. What does busha mean? Embarrassment means you don't want anyone to see you. You just want, you want to curl like a turtle curling up within yourself. But guess what you find when you go in yourself? It's a yichud minei ubei. That's the chiddush of Shevet Shimon. So the first appearance of Shmiya in Chumash is this inyan of Adam in embarrassment turning from God, which itself is tshuva, which itself is returning to Hashem. So he says like this: V'zeh Shmiya. This comes from hearing. The idea chaytu behester upon him through the sin. There's a concealment. Hashem turns away, so to speak. It feels like that, and we turn away from Hashem. Riyah means a tzaddik. That means a situation of good. Shvis Hashem l'negdi summit. That's when everything is good. But when things go haywire and you eat from the Esadas, then there's no seeing over there. Then all there is you saying within yourself you're hated, but God hearing that. That's the chiddush of Shmiya. The Gama Adam idea karsachet master panas. Hashem turns away through sin, and we turn away from sin. Kiyar mahabit, we're embarrassed to look. So everyone is back to back. Umitam zeh choyshev kisanu, and that's why you think you're hated, because you're turning away, and you see and you feel Hashem turning away. But in that state of turning around and turning within yourself, you in that place you hear the sound of Hashem resonating within you, expressing that bush also.
Why does he use that term from the snare, you already have it?
I guess maybe that's connecting to what's going on over there also. Moshe Rabbeinu is turning away because of his own sense of chesaron, his sense of busha, maybe. So that's the side of Shevet Shimon. So again, going back, so Shevet Shimon's bracha is not biksav because it's a yichud b'nei obey. The curse of Shevet Shimon is the exact the very deepest opposite of yichud, which is also cannot be biksav because it can't ultimately be true. But here's the amazing thing. So said Rashi, but we do have a hint of Shevet Shimon's brachas, which is within Shevet Yehuda. So yes, Shevet Yehuda is malchus. How could it be that that Shevet Shimon could be contained in that there's no shayfet, there's no melch for Shevet Shimon? The answer is the ultimate. What does it mean to be a melech? Again, there's an arichas by itself, but the meaning of a melech is to sit on the throne and to be that conduit for malchus Hashem. Whereas the melech is the representation of dveikus in Hashem. The reason why we give respect to the king is because the king represents malchus Shemayim. The king represents malchus Shemayim. So in normal shvatim, okay, you can have one person as the king. You know what the gilu of Shevet Shimon is? That every yid is a king. That's the chiddush of Shevet Shimon. The reason why there is no shayfet or melech for Shevet Shimon is because everyone is the shayfet and the melech in regards in Shevet Shimon. Because what does it mean to be a melech and a shayfet? It means that you are the embodiment of malchus Shemayim. The Rabbanu Shalom is manifest to the world through you. Shevet Shimon says that's true for every yid. So it's not the pshat. There's no shevet. There's no melech. The malchus and rulership is so true by Shevet Shimon that every Jew participates in that. Of course, you can't isolate it to one particular Jew and say, "Oh, he is the embodiment of malchus Shemayim," and we all face him. Everyone has that yichud minei ubei.
So why dafka his shevet was sitting?
That's where Tzaddik said because because the chesaron always reflects the mila. So because he had such a mila of yichud, the chesaron that comes before it is such a deep chesaron of yichud. This
Hopefully the bracha is to reveal to us God's calling Israel this evening.
Yes. That Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim, like Rav Shimon said in the Gemara, Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim, that every Jew has a status of a ben Melech, and even things like it's a halach l'mais. Rav Shimon Pasuk is like this in the Mishnah Shabbos. They have certain clothing and so on that only for Malchus royalty would walk around like that, and a shlepper it's like it's a ridiculous thing. So could he wear that on Shabbos? It's like carrying guy's a peasant and he's wearing like this huge huge crown and robe, and so it's a gelechter. Said Rav Shimon, even the poorest Jew can wear that on Shabbos because Kol Yisrael b'nei Malachim. That's the chiddush. That's Shevet Shimon. I mean, there is no melech from Shevet Shimon. There's no melech from Shevet Shimon because every yid is a melech. That's the chiddush of Shevet Shimon. Let's go deeper. It says for Tzaddik in Marmukah number 8. This is from Dover Tzedek, number 13, page 13. Vinay, the Kol Dalad Madregas. We know the neshama. Let's identify now more specifically what part of the neshama Shevet Shimon is activating and actualizing. The yichud of Minei Obei, where does it come from? So you know the neshama of a yid is there's 5 parts. Nefesh, bottom up. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida. Says Tzaddik in Dover Tzedek. He never called Dalad Madregas. The first 4 madregas of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, adainu madregas nivra. All those 4 madregas, you're still a created entity, and you have to face the Creator. Shadayin lo yegila madregas yechida. But when you reach that level of yechida shebenefesh, the place of yechida, the highest part of the soul, shua yichud amiti. That's called a yichud amiti, a truthful union. A truthful union by Rav Tzaddik, it means a yichud minei obei, from within the self, that you don't have to go anywhere else, but you get to the deepest place inside of you. Yerit Shoel is hineka. So in other words, based on that line of Rav Tzaddik, we now can identify that the in of Shevet Shimon is yichida. Yichida. And this is something that we've taka find when it comes to Rishon Bar Yochai. So take a look at Marmukah number 9. This is a maimer from the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Tavshin Mem Hey, Maimer Lag Baimer. So he says it's based on really an earlier maimer from the Marash, but this line sums it up clearly. Kirashbi hay betachlas hayichud. The in what's for Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai is an Inyan. His life was betachlas hayichud, in absolute unity with the Rebbeinu Shalom. K'maish Amar al-Atzmai. Shimon said about himself, "Anas simana ba'alma." I am just a simon. I'm just a simon. In other words, what do you mean a simon? He said, "Who am I? I'm nothing but just. I'm just a way for the Rebbeinu Shalom to come into the world. I'm nothing. I'm just a simon ba'alma. I'm just a simon ba'alma." And he said more than that. B'chad katira es katarna be'bekucharichu. I'm unified with one kesher with the Rebbeinu Shalom. This is not a description of a face to face with Hashem. Whenever it's face to face, it can be back to back. The chiddush of Reb Shimon over here is a yichud minei ubei, such a hiskashrus that cannot be undone. It's a yichud minei ubei. It's what? As the shu bittul v'hayichud shemitzad yichida. It's the bittul and hiskashrus Rebbeinu Shalom from yichida shavanefesh, and that's exactly what Shevet Shimon is. So Rishon Bar Yochai is the gilui of Shevet Shimon. That's exactly where Tzadik says the final Marmukim. This is this goes back to Takanas Hashavim. So Tzadik says Uchayoytze by Omer Rabbi Kiva l'Rashbi. Rabbi Kiva said to Rishon Bar Yochai, it's a famous story in the Rishalmi. Rabbi Kiva is giving smicha to his Talmidim, which is there's a Kabbalah is also Lag Baimer, and the first person he gives smicha to is Rabbi Meir, not Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon feels bad, and Rabbi Kiva turns to Rabbi Shimon. He says, "Dayacha, it's enough. Shani ubaracha yodin kachacha. That me and your Creator know your kaiches. That's enough." So you see it's an amazing thing. Even Shimon amongst his chaverim wasn't known, because how could he be? It's a yichud minei ubei. The whole Inyan of Rabbi Shimon is again just like the Shevet Shimon. The curse of Shevet Shimon is unknown. The blessing is unknown. It's all b'hiskasia. It's gevura of Leah. It's Helen Shabbatai Helen. The Gam who Shemai Shimon, his name is Shimon. That's the root of his neshama from this bechin of Shevet Shimon, like we've been talking about. Bechin kabalti, and he says, I have a tradition. That Rishon Bar Yochai was from Shevet Shimon. And that's why his kaiches have not been fully revealed in the world, because it's a yichud minei ubei, and the way that we think of world right now, of yichud between us and Hashem even, is two entities having dveikas. But a yichud minei ubei, which is a gil of yichidish avinefesh, that's something that's olam habedik. That's something that's Yemaisa Mashiachdik, and that's where Rishon Bar Yochai brings us to a gul barachim, and that's why I keep on talking about this. Reb Shimon is an Indian of Mashiach coming barachim, not the din. When you're talking about two entities coming to each other, that's a geula with din. Why? Because you gotta make it work. You gotta make it work. But when it's a yichud from within the self, that's barachimim. There's nowhere else to go. You're comfortable with yourself. With other people, sometimes you need a break. But with yourself, no one. People can say this, but they don't really mean it. No one ever woke up in the morning and said, like, I'm so tired of being me. I wish I was someone else for a day. No one really thinks that, because you don't get tired of yourself. You are yourself. Gul barachim means a giloi of yichidish nefesh, where the yichud between kuchabrichu shchinte is minei ubei. That's gul barachim. That's where Rishon Bar Yochai comes to reveal. No, should be zeicha to makash ourselves to the tzediki ames from Shimon. Should be zeicha to gul barachim. Maybe it's called tzedek meher v'yameinu.